Hi, welcome to another Jon Gaunt exclusive interview and my podcast. Today I've got a guest who I've interviewed many times before, but I could think of no one better to talk about what's happening in our great country at the moment, whether it's the migrant riots, Notting Hill Carnival. This man has actually policed the Notting Hill Carnival. What he doesn't know about protests and riots isn't worth knowing. He now advises governments all around the world, used to work for the UN as well, advising in places like Afghanistan. It's a pity our government don't listen to him, because I think he's got some of the solutions to the migrant crisis, Notting Hill, what's happening in Epping and around the country. And also he's got firm views on whether we're in for a summer of rioting. Delighted. Oh, he's also a police and crime commissioner, so he knows it from both sides. He joins me now. I'm sure you know him as well. His name is Kevin Hurley, and here he is. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, John. Good to be back with you again.
It's lovely to have you back. Thank you very much. Let's not mess about. When I wanted to talk about this, there is only one person I thought I needed to talk to, and it's you. So we are going to talk about the Notting Hill Carnival. That's coming up. We are going to talk about general policing tactics, and we're going to talk about what you think of people like Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. How the bloody hell do we stop the boats, etc. But let's start with what's been happening in Epping, now happening in places like Diss as well, and of course in Canary Wharf, the so-called migrant riots. Although they're not really migrant riots, they're ordinary people standing up and saying, I've had enough. What's going on in Britain, Kevin?
John, you've just said it in your last sentence. People have had enough. And so what we're seeing up and down the country, the good, ordinary, decent people, and they're not neo-Nazis, they are not right-wing people, they're saying, what is happening to our country? They're acutely aware of the fact that we are getting large numbers of young males between 30 and about 16 years of age who come from, if we're kind, the developing world, or if we tell it how it is, the third world, who are bringing their third world values and culture to this country. And that's impacting on us in many ways. What's obvious to the people is the fear of the crimes they commit, whether it's sexual assaults, wholesale shoplifting, or just intimidating women by hissing at them in the street. Because if you speak to any woman who's been on holiday in Algeria or Morocco or Egypt, and they've walked through the souks, they will tell you they don't like the way they leered at and so on. Well, that culture's there now. We've got it there. They haven't got their mums with them, and they haven't got their dads with them, and so they're not being controlled. For what it's worth, I actually, a while back, when I was a police and crime commissioner for a TV company, infiltrated undercover the Calais jungle. And I moved amongst what was completely unpoliced area, because the French police would not go in there unless there were hundreds at a time. Give you some context, people all living in tents, cardboard covers, etc. Hundreds and thousands of them from all over Africa and the Middle East. There'd been a murder the day I'd arrived there. Some Sudanese had murdered each other. And as I moved through, I became aware of the fact that virtually everyone there was a young man from all over the world, frankly. There was one small enclave of Kurdish families with the women and children who kept them apart, who you might say were genuine refugees to some extent from what was going on in Syria and northern Iraq at the time with Islamic State. But the rest of them, I formed the perception these are all young, fit men. Now, unless anyone thinks I've got a downer on these people, I haven't. Because I've worked in Iraq, Afghanistan, and much of Africa, I know what poverty looks like. I know what it looks like for people not knowing if they can get a meal in the next week, where the medical supplies are going to come from, if they've got a roof over their head, if they can get clean water.
Sure.
It is desperate. So if you have young men who are desperate, and perhaps their families see they are the only way out, they will give these young men some money to support them. And if they're risk takers, for which I respect them, They will take their chances and make their way across the war zones of Somalia, Sudan, Eritrea, Libya. They'll get on a boat and go across the Mediterranean and risk drowning or being thrown overboard by gangsters. They'll risk being predated upon by gangsters. They move up through Europe and then across into France before they take the perilous journey across the channel. These are not spineless people. They are risk takers.
So let me ask you,
John, let me just finish this point. The problem with a risk taker is, who comes from that environment, they've got no boundaries. They have no boundaries on their behaviour. And were they to be young British men, we would say, these are precisely the people we want in our infantry. They'd be good paratroopers. Some of them might make it in the special forces. They might go on to our elite detective squads because they are risk takers.
Right. But
when you have a risk taker who has no boundaries, and I forget the name of the armed robber who wrote a book once, John McVicker. He wrote his book, Being a Thief is a Great Life. The only trouble is they put you in prison for it. And the second comment was, I'm a risk taker, so I'd either have to be a thief or a copper. So the point is, when you've got risk takers who are not constrained, don't be surprised when we get the problem. So that leads us back to where you started about why are people starting to demonstrate around these various centres where they're being held.
Okay, before that, Kevin, let me just ask you a direct question. I like this term, risk takers. So they are young men of fighting age. They are risk takers, as you say. They could be in our infantry. They are hard cases because they have to be. They've been hardened by it. Why have successive governments, both Labour and Tories, told us it's women and children? They're fleeing war. They're fleeing persecution. It's bullshit. They're actually coming here for a better lifestyle, aren't they? And they bring this cultural baggage with them that you've just described. And therefore, that is one of the things that really fuels it with people in, say, Epping, when they see these men, as you say, hissing. And I've been to Morocco with my wife and children. I know exactly what you're saying, but you're saying that's now happening here. Why aren't our politicians being honest and putting the British people first?
Well, because they are being dishonest. You're absolutely right. And just to finish that point, when I've been in these various African countries, Iraq and Afghanistan, everyone is trying to groom me to be my friend to see if I can help them get into the UK. And the reason for it is they truly believe that it is the land of milk and honey, that you do get free accommodation, you get free schooling, you get food, you get money, you get mobile phones, and they want some of it. And you actually can't blame them because the offer is precisely that. And it's far better than what they've got, and therefore they're going to take the risk. But going back to your point about the government, because they won't tell the truth, because they foolishly mix up this, if you like, overwhelming flood of people that are coming through with the thought that people might call them racist, and therefore they may lose votes from the Muslim community or the Caribbean community or the African community and so on. No, they won't lose the votes because these people who are here legally from the Caribbean, Africa, India, they don't want it either. In fact, you know, it's a fact that a lot of Indian people voted for Brexit. They wanted to pull the ladder up. You know, they wanted a better life. So, you know, the government are not telling the truth. And in fact, yesterday I watched, what's her name? Angela Eagle. She was on with Trevor Phillips on Sky. Yeah. And she was talking about these poor refugees. And I'm thinking, why are you being so naive or willfully blind? You can see what they all are, or get out of your office, get your state provided driver and drive to one of these hotels and stand outside and have a look at who they are and see how long it is before one of them propositions you.
Okay, stop there for a moment because I just want to remind people you're watching the Jon Gaunt podcast. Don't forget you can get it on YouTube. Jon Gaunt TV is where you go to. If you never want to miss an interview, subscribe. It's free. You just press the subscribe button. You can do it now while you're watching. You can also listen to it in audio version on podcasts as well. I'm with Kevin Hurley, What he doesn't know about being a copper isn't worth knowing, as I said earlier. We're going to talk about the Notting Hill Carnival later. We're going to talk about the problem we've got with these economic migrants, which is, I think, what they are. They're not in the main refugees. And how do we stop the boats? Kevin, going back to you, if I can, just for a moment on what's happening in Epping, I want you to talk to me about the policing technique and whether it was wrong. And then last night, they obviously flooded the area. There's talk now about these people being moved out of Epping. Doesn't seem to me to be a solution because you just move them somewhere else. But let's go back to the El Dorado golden ticket kind of scenario you were painting. I've seen the jungle. I've not been there. You have. They don't live in 4-star hotels in Normandy, do they? They live in old warehouses, in tents. Why can't we, and again, you, ex-paratrooper, why don't we put up army tents like we do when there's a flood in Pakistan or a natural disaster? They shouldn't be in hotels. I say, and I want to know if you agree, close the bloody hotels, and that will take away some of the attraction.
Well, you're right, John. And if I may, I'll just correct you. They are not economic migrants. They are illegal immigrants who have committed a criminal offence by entering the UK without papers. They may well be coming because, as you rightly say, they want money. But these are all illegal immigrants. So now
people on the left would say what you're saying is completely wrong, because if you claim for asylum, you're then not breaking the law. You're saying by the very fact they landed at Dover, that's breaking the law, therefore the criminals.
Correct. So that leaves you to the point now where they can then go down the route, having been detained. There's a clue for where I'm going to lead to. Yeah. Having been detained and taken into a secure accommodation, they can then argue their case that they are seeking asylum, and we can make a decision if they are, in fact, committing the criminal offence of entering the UK illegally, or they're a genuine bona fide asylum seeker. Now, there is another point on this, that you should seek asylum in the first place you land. Yeah. Well, as we all know, France is, in real terms, a first world country with social benefits, and no one's going to kill you there specifically for whatever fictitious tale you make up why you need to run away. But the bottom line on it is, the people who come to the UK from most of these countries are not at risk of their lives. You know, they're not at risk of their lives in Afghanistan anymore. Neither are they in Iraq, Libya, Algeria, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, Eritrea. They are not at risk of their lives. They're not political activists or some kind of religious leader. You know, they're not some kind of advocate on Twitter who's likely to be cast into prison or worse. You know, it's all bullshit, John, to be quite honest with you. They are illegal immigrants. So going back to your point about tents, no, they shouldn't be in tents, John. We should, at the very least, copy the example of the Australians, which is when they came into their country, they detained them all and then took them offshore to islands and kept them in detention camps. And they kept them there until they assessed their situation, and then eventually said, well, we can send you back to where you came from if you want, or you're going to stay here. So what I'm saying is, we need to be real about this and break the paradigm where everyone thinks they're getting a nice hotel, they're getting 3 meals a day, they're getting 70 quid a week in their pocket to spend, they're getting a mobile phone, they're getting a SIM card, they're getting immediate access to doctors, immediate access to dentists. Some councils even pay for driving lessons for some of them. You know, think of that in the mind of a person who doesn't even know if they're going to be able to get a bowl of maize porridge a day. You know, that they don't know where they're going to get any clean drinking water from.
Sure.
You know, until you change that perception, and it's deeply embedded in the minds of people in most of the countries of Africa and Iraq, Afghanistan, that UK is the nicest place in the world.
So you were in favour of were you in favour of Labour's Conservatives' plan for a Rwanda type internment centre? Is that what you wanted?
Ridiculous waste of money. Ridiculous.
So where would you take them?
Total grandstanding. Well, I would start by the largest landowner in the UK is the MOD. I'd start by taking over some areas of the MOD, unused airfields, unused barracks, of which there are still significant numbers, build the equivalent of Nightingale detention camps, which are properly fitted out, warm, canteens, a little bit of amusement for them, but have got 2 or 3 layers of razor wire all way around them, patrolled by dogs. Have got an intervention team that will go in and stop it if they try and set it on fire, like they tried to do with St Martin's in the Plain military camp down in Folkestone once, and deal with it. And you just say to them, the bottom line is, if 80 people turn up in a boat and they're either picked up by the border force, quite rightly, in case we think they're going to drown and we're being humanitarian, they take them straight to a secure landing stage where they'll then be surrounded by 200 or 300 border force officers, police, call them what you want. They'll all be handcuffed. They'll all be taken away in secure vehicles, taken to a secure camp where they'll all be booked in, DNA taken, fingerprints taken, iris scans taken. And then each one will be sorted out as to why they're actually there. And if they've made it hard for themselves by throwing away their mobile phone and their passports, tough luck. But at the same time, we combine that with a massive information campaign on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, all the rest of them, exactly what we are doing, so people know that's what's happening. And we manage it. We get some people saying, don't come, we've been locked up here for 6 months. Some will still come because they'll come for the food, but it will stop it. Rwanda, at best, was going to take 100 or 200 people. It might have deterred the odd 1 or 2, but it was never workable. I've actually worked. I don't know if I've lost you, John, or you're still there. I've actually worked as a contractor for the Home Office. Cool. For the Home Office as a referee on deportation flights as to whether the private security companies are using too much force or not on deportations, and they take them out through Stansted. But most of the time they get stopped by different High Court judges' appeals. So I know
the planes don't take off.
It's not a workable. I mean, it's nice money. Thank you very much for UK government for paying me it. But it's not a workable solution to think you're going to do that.
Let me ask you a question.
You've got to make them think, John. You've got to make them think. When they come here, they're not going to get what's advertised.
Okay.
They're going to be taken into custody and they're going to be detained in Cat C prison-like situation.
Okay, I fully understand that. So what about successive prime ministers, successive political parties, Labour, Conservatives were in charge for 14 years, who have basically not done that? They've been playing Russian roulette with our, especially females, lives and security, haven't they? Because if I said to Keir Starmer or indeed Rishi Sunak, see that boat there that you were going to stop, or that gang you were going to stop, smash, whatever bullshit expression you're using, out of the 80 people in that boat, how many of them do you know that they're genuine or who they are? And why are you letting them just go and live in hotels? And of course, the next big con trick, they're going to close the hotels because of the pressure and put them in houses of multiple occupation. Now, I personally would say that's more dangerous than having them in the Holiday Inn. What do you say, Kevin?
Well, yeah, of course. And let's be clear about this. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, 90% of the people coming in the boats were Albanians. Do you remember?
Yeah. Do
you remember?
Yeah.
Who do you think now controls the entire cocaine distribution trade in the United Kingdom?
The Albanians.
Because they brought their soldiers in. The Albanians brought their operators in to enforce it. And the only place that they have not taken control of in the whole country is in Merseyside, because the Scousers are too tough for them. So, the bottom line on it is it's as cynical as that. And, as a sideline, a lot of the Albanians also control elements of people trafficking and sex slavery of young women. That's one of their other sidelines when they come to other people's countries.
Why are successive governments not listening to people like you, and indeed the people, like those women, because they were mums standing outside that hotel in Epping, worried about their kids, just like they did it in Southampton and Portsmouth when we had Sarah's Law and all that thing about paedophiles being put on predominantly white working class estates. Eventually people said, no, enough. Is that where we are now? And do you think that Yvette Cooper or Keir Starmer will realise this? Because I know you don't just blame Labour, do you? You think this goes into the Conservatives as well. Explain that to me.
If I'm honest, I feel sorry for what Labour have inherited. But let's turn to the Conservatives. We had 14 years of successive governments in disarray, changing the leader every 5 minutes. We became the laughing stock of the world in the way in which the Conservatives were conducting themselves, stabbing each other in the back. I mean, how many prime ministers do we have? 5, was it, or something?
Yeah. And a lettuce.
Yeah. Well, you know, I lose track of it. But what they did do is they did serious damage to the police service by cutting over 40,000 employees, closing regional training centres, closing down the strategic command centre, for example, so that the ability to train was much reduced. Theresa May, on page 56 of her election manifesto, said, if police don't stop using too much force on black people, prison officers or mental health nurses, I will legislate against them. So she actually stated that if police officers, prison officers or mental health nurses were using force on black people, then that she was going to come after them. So when you're creating that environment with the police, don't be surprised if the police are the way they are. Let's move on. The courts have been closed all over the country in large numbers. Those that exist are falling apart. There's a waiting list at Snaresbrook Crown Court for not guilty cases to 2029. 4 years for victims to wait for justice. 4 years for witnesses to wonder, am I going to have to go to court? That's where we are. Oh, and by the way, the prisons are so full to bursting that this government's having to let people out early because we can't fit any others in. And before we think of this, remember this one point when people criticise the police. The prisons are full to bursting because the police put them in there. It was not the RSPCA. So, you know, the police have done their best. But then probation has been slashed by the Tories. Drug treatment slashed by the Tories. So this current government have inherited a crop of poo. And the question is, are they demonstrating they're decisive enough to sort it out? Well, quite clearly, from what we're seeing at the moment, they're not.
No. Okay. Right. Let's move on to the domestic front now then. As I say, you've got plenty of experience of that as well. And that's brilliant what you just said about the courts, etc., etc. You're listening to the Jon Gaunt podcast. My special guest today, Kevin Hurley, used to be a police and crime commissioner. Before that, he was one of Britain's top coppers. Some people would say Britain's toughest copper. He also was in charge of West London. And that brings us naturally on to street problems, street robbery, and the Notting Hill Carnival. Kevin and I, before we started, we were laughing at the fact that how many times I'd interviewed him about, let's close down the Notting Hill Carnival. Let's move it to a park. And it's come up again this year. What's your view on Notting Hill now you're out of the police, looking back at it? Should it still carry on, and what needs to change, and what's wrong with the policing of it? Or is the policing right now?
Well, first off, individual police officers who go there, they dread going to the carnival because they know they're going to be subjected to abuse, being shoved around, spat at, assaulted, working a long, long day in unbelievable noise. They're scared. They are scared.
Scared, yeah.
I repeat, they are scared. And they know that if things get out of hand, their governors will back down until they've got no choice. When it's too late, then they'll have to put out the men with the shields and the horses. So that's the first point. Do the police it well? They shouldn't be, the carnival should not be in crowded streets like that with crowded tube stations. it is an unbelievable risk of a crashing incident. And one day at the Notting Hill Carnival, we will have much worse than some of these terrible incidents that we've seen at football matches and so on, where the crowds panic for some reason and 50, 100 people crushed and others seriously injured. It is no one in their right mind who's involved in managing crowds would ever organise such an event, partly exacerbated by the noise. You physically cannot hear yourself think. You can't communicate with the person next to you. When you pass some of these noise boxes, you feel your organs inside your body vibrating. So you're almost desensitized. So the risk is crushing is really quite enormous. And
so where would you move it? Would you move it to a park? Yeah,
you move it to a large park nearby, which is accessible to everyone, which has got good access and routes to it, with very, very wide roads leading into it. And I mean by that, Hyde Park, Park Lane, Piccadilly, Knightsbridge, the roads that lead along in Bayswater, they are all wide roads. There are tube stations some way away from that, which therefore reduces the risk of crushing. And because of the fact there are no buildings or narrow alleyways that would cause funneling and crushing, it could be done with a lot more safety.
And of course, moving it there isn't that far from Notting Hill and its traditional surroundings, is it? To be honest with you, if you were going to come down the Mall and all the rest of it, people wouldn't like it, but it would be much safer.
Yeah, it's 2 miles away. It's much safer. It's much more open, and the risks for everyone would much less. And indeed, if we now turn to the policing of it, because you would be able to control the points of entry with police officers with wands and search arches en masse, you would prevent weapons being brought in to the carnival. Whereas, as it exists at the moment within the area, weapons can already be there in people's houses, in some of the council estates off the back of the Ackland Passage and All Saints Road and so on. So you could make it much safer all round. And I can see no sensible reason not to hold it in Hyde Park.
Okay, let's move on from there. Let's move on to general policing. Is it just too soft? I mean, you made the point about Theresa May, 30,000 coppers or police jobs, 40,000 disappeared. They would argue, the politicians, a lot of them have come back now. But it's a different kind of police force, isn't it? It's a police service. And what do you do when you see them, I don't know, dancing on the bridges or at gay pride, or they're with the Stop Oil people? What do you make of all that? The rainbow, I like to call them the rainbow boot boys, It's pathetic, isn't it?
Well, I mean, John, but first of all, let me tell you this. I believe it should be called the police service, because that's kind of a statement of the values and standards. But part of that service is doing whatever is necessary to keep people safe.
Right.
And part of that ethos of service is, a blind person is trying to cross the road or an old lady's lost, then a constable does the right thing and gives service, because people will pay back when you build back these local relationships.
I see that. Yeah, fair enough.
But, so back to your point about, has it become too soft? I was, as you trailed me, an extremely positive police officer in my day. And I was not shy at laying hands on people, wrestling people to the ground, or if they were resisting seriously or assaulting me, frankly, causing them a lot of pain back, if that's what was needed. I didn't hesitate. I'm not there to be anyone's punch bag. But we've got a different ethos now. On all sides, we've got cameras and phones and people ready to judge all over the media what's gone on, without knowing the full context, where a clip can be nicely edited. Let's look at the Manchester case, although we're waiting to see the outcome.
We don't know at this moment what the result of that is, but go on.
Exactly. But, look how people's views have changed now they've seen the full clips. So anyway, let's move on now about, is it too soft? Let's look what just happened 2 months ago in Dorset, Bournemouth, a lovely seaside town that's becoming increasingly lawless for all kinds of reasons, people being sexually assaulted on the beach, violence and so on. So an early turn shift came on duty, and on one of those shifts was a PC called Lorne, who was known as a real thief taker. In his spare time, he ran a boxing club for kids. So he was really doing his bit for the community, this bloke.
Yeah.
But there's a clue, because he ran a boxing club, he can handle himself.
Yeah.
So he goes to work and he's given a briefing. We've had serious trouble last night in the town. Be aware of people having weapons. Just at the end of his early shift, he receives a call, which he could have ignored because it's his time to go home, to saying there's a disturbance, I think, at a McDonald's. An old man's been assaulted. There's youths there and one's got a knife. So he arrives on scene. One of the youths who pointed out to him has got a knife. He tries to get him to stop. He won't. They have a fight. He wrestles him to the floor. The guy's screaming, shouting and fighting. And the police officer calls him a bitch and uses the F word on him.
Yeah.
His two colleagues standing next to him are kind of going, oh, stop resisting.
Yeah.
Right? One of those colleagues then goes back and says, who's got no time in the police. Oh, I think he used a bit too much. We're not grasping, it's a bit too much force on him. The sergeant inspector says, no, it's fine. Chief inspector says, no, appropriate. You've only been in the police 5 minutes. Don't know what you're talking about. But he gets pursued. Then it gets picked up by the professional standards who decide to investigate it. Then it goes up for a decision by the deputy chief constable. And she stated after the case, I knew he was a wrong un or gone over the top before she'd made what should have been an objective decision on whether or not there should be a discipline hearing or not. So she's already prejudged it before there's a hearing. He's then tried before another assistant chief constable who decides what he did will lose public confidence, so they dismiss him. Yeah. I've got to tell you, the average member of the public would like to think that if someone's got, and he was found with a knife, by the way, a Stanley knife, and a lock knife, by the way, the public would like to think that their coppers are going to do that with people who scare them when they're having their McDonald's in possession of a knife. But oh no, the chief constable, deputy chief constable of Dorset and the assistant chief constable of Wiltshire all decided, oh no, we don't want this person, despite his commendations, despite his bravery awards, we don't want him in the police. So they chucked him out. Do you know what he did about 3 weeks ago?
Go on.
Caught a shoplifter.
Yeah, I saw that in the
him
papers.
And detained him. Even though he'd been sacked, he's still got copper's blood in him. You know, it is appalling that we are in a situation where the chief constable hasn't made a decision to immediately override that and reinstate him. So back to your point about weak police. How do you think all the coppers in Dorset now react to confrontation, do you think?
Oh, precisely. I understand what you're saying.
So
that brings me on to, Kevin, what do you think about the allegations of two-tier policing? I mean, in Epping, the chief constable, it looks like he escorted those Antifa, that some people would describe them, into that protest and took them away again in police vans afterwards. Have we got two-tier policing? And then I'll just throw into the pot the Palestinian-style protests versus the Countryside Alliance, or, dare I say it, Tommy Robinson and his demos that he's had in London, which there's not been much trouble at. I'm not a Tommy fan, by the way, but how come they're policed differently? Well, is there two-tier policing?
Let me just deal firstly with the little issue about the Epping Forest, about what happened with the Antifa people. Because it was a violent, difficult situation, one of the things police always want to do, and they do it with football fans, incidentally, or they'll do it with pro-Jewish or Palestinians, they will try and keep them apart. Because they know if they get together, you're going to get fireworks. So it's quite right they would keep them apart. And because it was getting more and more lively, to use a police jargon term, but more and more violent, the police took a view they needed to escort them away from the scene. And they thought the quickest way so they could get it over and done with is load them on their vans and get rid of them. To be quite honest with you, John, perfectly reasonable. Get them out the area, take the sting out of it. I don't see that as an example of two-tiered policing. And even some of these Palestinian marches, or even people around, I don't see us out. I'll tell you what I see as an example of two-tier policing. All these black kids being murdered in London by black kids. That's real two-tier policing for you. Because, and I'll give you an example, in 2008, when 29 teenagers were stabbed to death in the UK, 28 of them were black, and in all 29 cases, the stabbers or the murderers who shot them were black. What that tells you is if you want to stop people carrying knives who are likely to kill people, i.e. black youths, you need to stop and search people who carry knives who happen to be black youths in disproportionate numbers. And yet, if you look at it in London now, stop and search is a shadow of what it once was. And the police are buckling over left, right and centre and going, oh, we've got to be more sensitive and careful in stopping and how we deal with our black youths. And as a result of this two-tier approach, we are the police chiefs and the politicians, because they're buckling down under some of the activists who, from organisations like Stopwatch and, dare I say, the College of Policing, are reducing the number of black youths who are being stopped and searched. And as a result, they're being stabbed and dying. The only reason more black youths aren't dying on the streets of London is not anything to do with what the police or any social workers or any activists have got to say about it. It's because lots of British soldiers were seriously wounded in Afghanistan and Iraq, and lots of reservists from the National Health Service went out and worked at places like the Camp Bastion Emergency Hospital and learned how to staunch traumatic blood flow. And they've now brought that back into the National Health Service, and those techniques are now being used on ambulances and police vehicles and A&Es. That's why less black people are dying than before. So that's two-tier policing. The police are backing off. You ask black mums what they want, because I used to. And I used to get a unanimous vote. We want you to do more stop and search on our boys. They are like lions. We need your help to control them. That's what they will tell you. They may say something different when you nick them, but when they're in a big meeting, that's what they say. And with the activists and people from the Mayor's office from London who are quoting the disproportionality statistics, I've been in a meeting where the black mums chased them out and said, shut up. We want the police chief to save our boys. I mean, that's the reality of it. So that's an example of two-tier policing. But let me tell you one that's going on right now, John. It is the most shocking and the most horrific thing you can imagine. We've all heard of female genital mutilation. Yes. Which involves little prepubescent girls being held down by a load of women when they're stripped naked, and with a rusty old razor blade, they have their clitoris, their labia minora and majora cut off, and they're sewn back up. And they're screaming and bleeding, and some die, and some have terrible infections. This is happening to British girls of Somalian, Eritrean, Ethiopian, Sierra Leone, Maasai extraction, who are brought back at this time of year on flights into Addis Ababa or through Istanbul, routing into Africa, where they go back to the traditional villages where their mothers and grandmothers came from, and they think they're going for a party to become a woman. And that's what happens. And do you know why they take them at this time of year, John? Go on. Because it's the start of the school holidays. Yeah. And that gives them enough time for the wounds and infections to clear up before they go back to school in September. The cutting season has started. It's going on right now. And I suspect at this very moment, John, there are little British girls being taken out through Gatwick, Manchester and Heathrow en route to these different places around. And
we're doing nothing to stop that, I guess, is what you're saying as a country.
It's what I'm saying. And I'll tell you why it's really appalling, because there are a lot of people who in the past have done their best to raise this issue of female genital mutilation. The genital mutilation. Ask any midwife who works in an inner city with ethnic minority populations about the women who they have to deal with for childbirth and so on, who've been sewn up or subjected to this abomination. There are thousands of cases up and down the UK. Are you still with me, John?
Yes, I'm listening to you.
They're up and down the UK. So back in 2013,
yeah,
when I was a police and crime commissioner in Surrey, I saw a Facebook post by a Baroness Tonge. I think she might be Liberal. I don't know.
yeah.
And she said, I was on a flight to Addis Ababa, and I suddenly became aware there were lots of little girls and mums and grandmothers and no boys or no men. And she said, it suddenly dawned on me, I was on a flight full of little British girls going for the cutting season.
Yeah.
Now, I spoke with her, John, and I identified the flights, and I know how it all works. So because I was a police and crime commissioner, I got on to what was called then the ACPO, now National Police Chiefs Lead, for UK ports. Because these various chief officers up and down the country have a little sideline job for them that want to get another promotion. Say, look at me, Home Secretary, I'm doing a nice little job as well. Or because they care. Be fair, some care, because I was actually the lead for street robbery, actually. So, you know, that's a different story. But anyway, and I phoned this guy up and I said, look, this is the flight number and this is the place they left from. And it will be an easy job now to identify who all of them are and what flights they're due to come back on. So you can meet them at the arrivals gate, take the girls off to one side and have a word with them. And I remember talking to this assistant chief constable, who was in Merseyside at the time. And I remember thinking, and I think I even said this to him, look, I know what I'm telling you is about as welcome as me tipping a cup of hot sick in your lap, but you better deal with this because I'm going to expose you.
Yeah.
Because at the time I could talk on the media. The next thing, I got referred down to the national lead for this kind of stuff in the Metropolitan Police, and had a similar conversation where I said, well, I'm going to expose you if you don't do something about this. Now, lo and behold, what did happen in the end is the Met then started meeting some people at the ports as they went out in the Heathrow and indeed at Gatwick. And I was particularly pleased one time. Are you there, John?
Yes, I'm listening to you. Carry on. Yes, carry on, Kevin. I can hear you. Kevin, I'm still here.
Hello,
at your end, the connection. Carry on talking if you can.
Hello.
Yeah, Kevin's abroad at the moment. That's the complication. So he can't hear me for a moment. Hello, Kevin. I think we may have to leave it there. But that was, what an amazing story that is from Kevin. What did you make of that? What did you make of what he had to say about street robberies? What did you make about what he had to say about the Notting Hill Carnival? What about the riots in Epping? I'll get Kevin on again on another day. But if you've got
I'm back, John.
Oh, he's back. Hold on a second. Okay,
right, John,
Kevin, we're going to have to wrap it there because we're losing the connection. But just...
All right, John, let me just tell you this. I was particularly pleased on this subject of female genital mutilation, as I went through Gatwick one time to see some plainclothes cops. I spotted them. So I showed out to him. I said, what are you up to? He said, well, this is a flight to Istanbul. Some of the mothers have now worked out that we check the flights to Addis Ababa and on to Nairobi.
Yeah. Go on. No, we've definitely lost him now. I do apologise.
I'm back again.
Can you just wrap up very quickly because the connection is obviously dropping? I do apologise.
To finish this then, John. So the individual cops were proactive, stopping them, trying to mislead them by going through Istanbul. But John, 3 days ago, I got on a plane to Addis Ababa, chatting with all these little girls and mums, and then I suddenly realised they're all Somalis.
Yeah.
And there's no boys and men. And to my horror, I realised I was on a cutting season flight, and these little girls,
British girls,
watching videos and cartoons and drinking their juice, just like our own kids would do when you're going on holiday, don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know. That, John, is two-tier policing. They will not tackle this because they're scared of the community's reaction. That is much worse than anything. Hundreds of little British girls are suffering grievous bodily harm because of the spineless two-tier policing who won't stop this.
That's an incredible point you made, Kevin. Thank you very much indeed for making it. And thanks very much for being on the show today. We'll get you back again because there's plenty more for us to talk about. Just hold on there for a moment while I wrap up, and then I'll say goodbye to you. That's Kevin Hurley, ex-police crime commissioner for Surrey, ex-commander of the police in West London. He has been at Notting Hill. He's been one of the main commanders at that. But that story at the end about female circumcision, well, it isn't, is it? It's actual mutilation. That's happening. And he says it's still happening today. That's a massive story, and that needs sorting. I thought that was a brilliant interview, not because of me, but because of what he had to say. It just sort of takes your legs away, doesn't it? If you want to comment on that, feel free, comment at the bottom here on the YouTube video. Put your comment up. Also, feel free, of course, to like and share this. And if you're listening to the podcast, feel free to get onto my Twitter account or my Facebook account and talk about this. But the biggest thing you can do is to like and share it. Tell other people. Gaunt is back. He's doing these long-form interviews as well as the daily program at Monday to Thursday at 6:30, where we talk about all kinds of things. I don't think this is the kind of broadcasting you get anywhere else. I think it's worth me carrying on with. Don't you? Hope you enjoyed it. The only thing to say now at the end of the show, as always, if you've got kids, give them a kiss, give them a hug. Hey, hey, hey. Don't forget to tell them you love them. Thanks a lot. Bye.